A crowded city bus. A vacant seat beside a quiet black woman reading a book. A white man bored sees her and loudly refuses to sit, his words dripping with contempt. Passengers shift uncomfortably, some look away, others pull out phones. The driver watches through the rearview mirror, jaw tightening. What happens next transforms an ordinary Tuesday morning into a moment no one will forget, a choice between silence and action, between complicity and courage. Sometimes justice arrives not with sirens but with a simple decision. Enough is enough. The 7:42 a.m. bus to downtown pulled away from Maple Street with a hydraulic hiss. Morning light filtered through scratched windows, casting pale stripes across tired faces. Construction workers in dusty boots claimed seats near the back. A nurse in faded scrubs scrolled through her phone. Two students whispered over shared earbuds. The engine rumbled beneath conversations about weather and weekend plans. Grace Mitchell sat 3 rows behind the driver right side window seat. She wore royal blue scrubs and white sneakers worn soft from hospital hallways. A paperback rested in her lap, some thriller she'd been reading for 2 weeks between shifts. The seat beside her remained empty as passengers filed past, choosing spots near friends or strangers who looked less tired than themselves. The bus filled slowly, standing room only by the fourth stop. Grace shifted her bag to the floor, making space. She didn't look up from her book. Just another Tuesday morning. Just another ride through city streets that never quite woke up before 9. At Riverside and 5th, a man boarded. Mid-50s, pressed white shirt, charcoal slacks. His leather briefcase caught the light, expensive, well-maintained. Gold watch glinted on his wrist. He paid his fare without looking at the driver, scanning the crowded bus with the expression of someone perpetually inconvenienced by other people's existence. His eyes landed on the empty seat beside Grace. His jaw tightened. The man stood in the aisle, briefcase gripping tighter. Passengers shuffled past him, murmuring apologies. He didn't move, just stared at that seat like it had personally offended him. Grace felt the weight of his gaze before she saw him, that particular heaviness that meant trouble was coming. She looked up. Their eyes met, and something ancient and ugly crawled into the space between them. Where are you from? Drop your location in the comments below. And if you're loving this story already, hit that like button and subscribe for more incredible moments like this. But what Grace couldn't see, what none of them could see yet, was the man behind the wheel. Marcus Wells, 58 years old, 23 years driving this exact route. His hands rested on the steering wheel, casual. But his eyes had found the rearview mirror, and they weren't moving from what was about to happen. Grace's morning had started like every other. Alarm at 5:47 a.m., coffee in the kitchen of her small apartment on 7th Street. She'd stood at the window watching the city wake up, steam rising from her mug, thinking about the day ahead. 12-hour shift in pediatrics, needle-shy toddlers, worried parents, the constant dance between crisis and comfort. She'd been a nurse for 12 years, chose it after watching her younger brother fight leukemia at 14. He survived. She never forgot the nurses who held his hand through the worst nights, who made him laugh between needle sticks, who treated him like a person, not a patient. That's what she wanted to be, what she became. Her apartment was small but hers. Bookshelves crammed with novels and medical journals, photos on the fridge, her mother in Alabama, brother's wedding, nursing school graduation, a life built from quiet determination and paychecks that never quite stretched far enough. The bus was cheaper than driving. 30 minutes to decompress before hospital chaos. 30 minutes back to remember she existed outside those fluorescent halls. This morning felt no different. She'd grabbed her bag, locked her door, walked 3 blocks to the bus stop. Waited with the usual faces, the construction crew, the grocery store manager, the high school teacher who always graded papers while standing. Normal, routine, safe. Grace liked routine. It meant control in a world that often felt chaotic. Her shifts were unpredictable, codes, emergencies, parents breaking down in waiting rooms. But the bus was steady, same route, same time, same quiet 30 minutes with a book and her thoughts. She thought about her grandmother often on these rides. Mama Ruth, who'd marched in Selma in 1965, who'd been spit on, called names worse than Grace could imagine, who'd taught her that dignity wasn't given, it was claimed, held, protected. Baby, she used to say, they want you small, don't ever give them that power. Grace never planned to be brave, she just planned to exist, to work hard, to help people, to live a good life without bothering anyone, but hidden dangers don't ask permission, they don't wait for convenient timing. And this morning, Danger wore expensive shoes and carried a briefcase. Something was about to go very wrong, she just didn't know it yet. The man remained standing in the aisle. 5 seconds, 10, passengers glanced up confused. The bus idled at the stop, doors still open. The driver, Marcus, watched through the rearview mirror, waiting. Sir, a woman's voice from the back. There's a seat right there. The man turned, irritation flashing across his face. I see it. Well then, I'm not sitting there. Silence spread like spilled water. Grace's stomach dropped. She knew that tone, had heard it before in different forms, different situations. The particular edge that meant she was about to become a problem for someone who'd never met her. She straightened in her seat. Is there an issue? The man's eyes slid to her, cold, assessing, finding her lacking in some fundamental way she'd never be able to fix. I'm not sitting next to you people. The words hung in the air like smoke. A teenage boy near the back pulled out his phone, didn't even pretend to be subtle about it. The woman who'd spoken earlier sucked in breath. The construction workers exchanged glances. The nurse in scrubs looked down at her hands. Grace's book trembled. She gripped it tighter, knuckles going pale. You people. Don't make this difficult. The man shifted his briefcase to his other hand. I'll stand. The bus is full. This from an elderly white woman with a cane near the middle. Her voice wavered but held firm. You're blocking the aisle. Then she can move. Time stretched. Every passenger became a witness, a participant, a person forced to choose in that moment what kind of human they wanted to be. Most looked away, studied their phones, pretended not to hear. The bystander effect in real time, everyone hopping someone else would handle it. Grace felt heat rise up her neck, shame and rage mixing into something that tasted like copper. She'd done nothing wrong, absolutely nothing. Sat in her seat, read her book, bothered no one. And now this stranger demanded she shrink herself to accommodate his prejudice. I'm not moving, she said, quiet but clear. The man's face reddened. Excuse me. I said I'm not moving, I was here first. The seat is available, you can sit, stand, or get off, those are your options. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, he wasn't used to resistance, expected compliance. Expected her to disappear like she probably had 1,000 times before in smaller ways. But Grace thought of Mama Ruth, of marches and fire hoses and people who'd refused to move when told. The man turned toward the front. Driver, are you going to do something about this? Marcus Wells had been watching the entire time. His hands hadn't moved from the steering wheel. His face remained neutral. But his jaw worked like he was chewing words he wasn't ready to spit out yet. The conflict was intensifying, every second dragged. The teenager kept filming, other phones emerged from pockets. The man looked around, seeing he was being recorded, his confidence flickered. This is ridiculous. He moved toward the empty seat, stopping just short, loomed over Grace like intimidation might work where words hadn't. You're making everyone late. Grace looked up at him, met his eyes without flinching. No, you are. And in that moment, everyone on that bus understood. This wasn't ending quietly. Stakes had been revealed. A line had been drawn, and whatever happened next would matter far beyond this single morning ride. Grace's heart hammered against her ribs. She could hear it in her ears, that particular thunder that came with confrontation. Her hands shook despite her firm grip on the book. The words on the page blurred into meaningless shapes. She'd faced racism before. Of course she had. Microaggressions at the grocery store, side-eyes in nice neighborhoods, the particular exhaustion of proving her competence every single day at work. But this public, explicit declaration of her unworthiness hit different, landed harder. Because it wasn't subtle, wasn't deniable, just raw contempt wrapped in expensive clothes and arrogance. The kind that assumed the world would accommodate it. Grace thought about getting up, just standing, grabbing her bag, moving to a different seat, erasing herself from this man's field of vision, making it easier. Letting it go, she'd done it before, most people had. Sometimes survival meant choosing battles. Sometimes peace meant swallowing poison and calling it medicine. Her mother's voice echoed, "Baby, you don't have to fight every fight." But then Mama Ruth's voice stronger, "When they try to make you less than human, that's the fight you can't walk away from." Around her, silence pressed down like physical weight. Nobody spoke. Nobody defended her, just phones out, recording, witnesses to her humiliation, future viral content. The modern Colosseum where everyone watched but few intervened. The man still stood over her, radiating expectation, waiting for her to fold, to apologize for existing, to thank him for the lesson. Grace closed her book, looked straight ahead. Her voice came out steady despite the trembling in her hands. "I'm not moving." She said it again, for herself this time, for Mama Ruth, for every person who'd ever been told to shrink. "I'm not moving." But what would happen next? What could she do if he escalated? If no one helped, the questions spiraled, but underneath them something harder was forming. A resolve born from exhaustion with being made to feel like a problem for simply existing. Grace was 7 when she first understood. The playground at Madison Elementary. She'd been on the swings, pumping her legs, flying higher. A white girl approached, same age, blonde pigtails, princess backpack. Grace smiled. The girl smiled back. They'd started talking about favorite colors and cartoon characters. Then the girl's mother appeared, grabbed her daughter's hand hard enough to hurt. "We don't play with those children," said it loud enough for everyone to hear. Dragged the crying girl away while Grace sat frozen on that swing, feet dragging in the dirt. Her mother found her an hour later, still sitting there, still not swinging. Grace asked the question every black child eventually asks, "Why doesn't she want her daughter to play with me?" Her mother's face did something complicated. Anger and heartbreak and exhaustion all at once. She knelt down, eye level. Because some people are taught to be afraid of what's different, and fear makes people cruel. "But I'm not different." "No, baby, you're not, but they think you are. And until they learn better, we have to be stronger, smarter, kinder. We have to be everything they say we're not." It wasn't fair. 7-year-old Grace understood that immediately. Why did she have to be better just to be treated as equal? But she learned the lesson anyway, absorbed it into her bones. She chose nursing because it was undeniable. You couldn't argue with saved lives, with steady hands during codes, with the comfort she brought to terrified children. She made herself excellent, made herself necessary, thought maybe that would be enough. It never was. Excellence didn't protect you. Competence didn't shield you. She could save a child's life on Tuesday and get followed through a store on Wednesday. Could be trusted with the most vulnerable humans in the hospital and still be told she didn't deserve a bus seat. The lesson Mama Ruth taught was different from her mother's. Dignity isn't something you earn, Grace, it's something you have. And when someone tries to take it, you hold tighter, you stand taller. You remind them and yourself that your humanity isn't up for debate. Mama Ruth had marched across the Edmund Pettus Bridge, had stared down fire hoses and attacked dogs, had bled for the right to vote, to sit where she wanted, to exist without permission. She died when Grace was 19, but her voice never left. That past trauma echoed in every present moment of discrimination. And now on this bus, Grace realized she'd been preparing for this moment her entire life. Every lesson, every instance of swallowed rage, every time she'd made herself smaller to make others comfortable, it all led here. To this seat, this man, this choice. A skill was emerging, not just survival, but resistance. The memory of every ancestor who'd refused to move was rising in her blood. She wasn't alone on this bus. Mama Ruth rode with her, and that legacy demanded she stay exactly where she was. Marcus Wells saw everything from the driver's seat. 23 years behind this wheel taught you to read a situation fast. Drunk passengers, fights brewing, medical emergencies, threats. He'd handled them all with the particular skill of someone who knew when to intervene and when to let things settle naturally. But this was different. His eyes found the rearview mirror, the man standing, Grace sitting, spine straight, fear and determination mixing on her face. Other passengers looking away, the teenager filming, the whole ugly scene playing out like he'd seen 100 times before in 100 different forms. Marcus's hands tightened on the wheel. He was 58 years old, had 2 daughters and 3 grandchildren, had driven this route through recessions and booms, through summers and ice storms, through the daily theater of human behavior at its best and worst. He'd learned to stay neutral, keep the bus moving, don't get involved. The job was transportation, not social work. But something didn't add up anymore. That philosophy, that neutrality, started feeling less like professionalism and more like cowardice the older he got. He thought about his youngest daughter, Keisha. She was Grace's age, worked as a teacher. Called him last week crying because a parent demanded she be removed from their child's classroom. Didn't give a reason, didn't have to. The meaning was clear. Marcus had told her what his father told him. Keep your head down, do your job, don't make waves. The same advice passed down through generations like an inheritance of survival. But survival wasn't the same as living, and maintaining peace for some meant accepting war for others. His late wife, Diana, wouldn't have stayed silent. She'd have stood up the second that man opened his mouth. Would have made it clear that hatred had no seat on her bus, her block, her world. Marcus had always admired that about her. Envied it even, the courage to act when others watched. She'd been gone 3 years now, and sometimes, in quiet moments, he wondered if he'd spent too much of his life watching. Too many years choosing comfort over conviction. The bus idled at the stop, engine rumbling, passengers waiting, the man still standing, still expecting Grace to move, still certain that the world would bend to his will because it always had before. Marcus looked at Grace's reflection, saw Diana in her somehow, that same quiet strength, that refusal to disappear just because someone found her inconvenient. And suddenly Marcus realized something that should have been obvious years ago. He had power here. Maybe not much, maybe not lasting, but real. The door controls were his, the route was his, the rules were his to enforce. He could keep driving, pretend he didn't see. Let this woman carry the weight alone while he stayed safe in his neutrality. Or he could do what Diana would have done. The truth was bigger than this bus ride. It was about every time he'd looked away. Every moment he'd chosen silence over justice because fighting wasn't his job, wasn't his problem, wasn't his risk to take. But whose job was it, whose problem, whose risk? If not his, then whose? Marcus released the steering wheel, pressed the button that locked all doors, and made a choice that would change everything. The bus lurched suddenly, not pulling into traffic, not continuing the route, just stopping right there between stops, engine running but going nowhere. Passengers looked up, confused. The man in the aisle stumbled slightly, caught himself. "What are you doing?" Marcus stood slowly, deliberately. His full height made the narrow aisle seem smaller. He turned to face the cabin. Every eye found him. His voice came out quiet, the kind of quiet that made people lean in. "Sir, I need you to take that seat or exit my bus." The man's eyebrows shot up. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious." Marcus took one step down the aisle. "You've been disrespectful to a passenger who was minding her own business. You made your refusal about her race. That's not happening on my bus." You can't, the man's face flushed crimson. I'm a paying passenger, I have rights. You do, and so does she, and her right to ride without harassment trumps your right to be a bigot. Marcus's voice never rose, didn't need to. So here's what's going to happen. You're going to sit in that seat, or you're going to apologize to this woman and find a different seat, or you're going to get off my bus, choose. The man looked around, searching for support, finding none. The other passengers watched with held breath. Some looked shocked, others relieved. The teenager kept filming, phone held high. This is, the man sputtered. I'll have your job for this. You're discriminating against me. I'll call your supervisor. I'll sue the transit authority. Do you understand what you're doing? Marcus's jaw tightened. Fear flickered across his face so quickly most people missed it, but Grace saw it, recognized it, the same fear she felt, the knowledge that standing up could cost everything. Job, security, future. But Marcus didn't back down. Then I guess I'll lose my job for the right reason, wouldn't be the worst thing to happen. He pulled his radio from his belt. Now choose, clock's ticking. The man's laugh came out sharp, nervous. You're making the biggest mistake of your life, old man. Maybe, Marcus's finger hovered over the radio button. But staying silent while someone gets degraded, that feels like a bigger one. He looked at Grace, made eye contact through the rearview mirror. Something passed between them, understanding, solidarity, mutual risk. Then Marcus pressed the button. Dispatch, this is bus 47. I've got a situation. Passenger refusing to comply with conduct policy. I need a supervisor at my location. Riverside and 5th. The radio crackled. Copy that 47, supervisor en route, ETA 12 minutes. 12 minutes, the man's face went pale. This was real. Consequences were real. The video was real. Everything was suddenly terrifyingly real. He took one step toward Grace. Loomed over her like intimidation was his last card to play. You're really going to let this happen? You're going to cost this man his job over a seat. Grace looked up at him, her voice shook but held. You're the one who made this about more than a seat. The man's briefcase slipped slightly in his sweating palm. Around them, the bus had become a pressure cooker. Every passenger leaning forward, every phone capturing, every witness holding their breath. Marcus stood between the man and Grace now, not touching anyone, not threatening, just present, just refusing to move, the way Grace had refused to move. And somewhere in that moment, everyone on that bus understood this wasn't ending quietly. This wasn't getting smoothed over. Whatever happened next would ripple far beyond this morning, would matter in ways they couldn't predict. The man looked at Marcus, at Grace, at the phones, at the locked doors. His arrogance was cracking, but something desperate was emerging underneath. Cornered animals bite hardest. You're all going to regret this, he whispered. The radio crackled again. 47, supervisor is 10 minutes out, situation status. Marcus kept his eyes on the man. Situation unchanged. Passenger still refusing to comply, will wait. And the wait began, 12 minutes that would feel like 12 hours, 12 minutes where everything hung in balance, where courage met consequence, where justice and risk danced in narrow aisles under fluorescent lights. Grace's hands finally stopped shaking, not because the fear was gone, but because she wasn't alone anymore, because someone had stood up, because maybe finally things could be different. The man pulled out his phone, started filming Marcus. This is discrimination, I'm being targeted, I'm documenting everything. Marcus nodded, good, so are they, he gestured to the passengers. Truth doesn't fear witnesses. The bus idled. The city moved around them. And inside this metal container, history was being written in real time. Small history. The kind that happens between people who'll never make headlines but whose choices ripple through the world anyway. And everything was at risk. Jobs, safety, peace, comfort, everything people spend their lives protecting. But somewhere along the way, Marcus had learned what Diana always knew. Some things matter more than safety. Some moments demand you stand up even when your knees shake, even when the cost is high. The doors stayed locked, the clock ticked, and everyone waited to see what justice looked like when it finally, impossibly showed up. The minutes crawled 3, 5, 7. The man stood rigid in the aisle, phone still recording Marcus. His face had gone from red to pale, sweat beading at his temples, but he wouldn't move, wouldn't apologize. Just stood there like stubbornness could rewrite reality. Grace felt the weight of every silent face behind her. The initial surge of solidarity, those voices that had spoken up, had faded into uncomfortable quiet. People shifted in seats, checked watches, whispered about being late to work. The teenage boy still filmed, but even his arm was getting tired. This was how it always went. The initial outrage, the moment of collective courage. Then the slow erosion as people remembered their own lives, their own problems, their own reasons to stay uninvolved. Justice was inspiring until it became inconvenient. Grace started gathering her things, slowly. Her book slipped into her bag, her hands found the straps. Maybe this wasn't worth it. Maybe making space for his hatred was easier than forcing a confrontation that could hurt Marcus more than help her. The old survival instinct kicked in: erase yourself, make it easy, disappear. Her grandmother's voice whispered, but it felt distant now, drowned out by practical concerns. Bills to pay, shifts to cover. A life that required her to show up intact, not broken by battles she couldn't win. The man saw her movement, smiled slightly, victory within reach. Grace stood, started to slide past him into the aisle, ready to move to the back, ready to surrender this small piece of dignity so everyone else could get on with their day. The familiar weight of accommodation settled on her shoulders like an old coat. But then her hand brushed the seat. That seat her grandmother had fought for the right to sit in, that seat generations had bled for, and something shifted. A flicker. A tiny spark of something Mama Ruth had whispered once during a bedtime story about the Montgomery bus boycott. Baby, the world changes when good people stop moving out of the way. Ma'am, a voice from the back. Grace turned. The elderly white woman with the cane was standing, difficult for her, clearly painful. Her voice shook but carried. Don't you dare move from that seat. Grace froze. The woman continued, louder now. I'm 73 years old. I lived through the 60s. I watched people like you get beaten for wanting basic dignity. I was silent then, ashamed to say it, but I'm not being silent now. She looked directly at the man. You should be embarrassed. A grown man acting like a child because he has to sit next to someone whose skin is darker than his. It's 2025, do better. A construction worker stood next. Muscled, tattooed, white. Yeah, man, this is pathetic. Just sit down or leave. Some of us got jobs to get to, and you're holding everyone up with your nonsense. Another voice, the nurse in scrubs, Latina, exhausted looking. I work with black nurses every day. They save lives. They're good people. Better than you're being right now. One by one, voices rose. Not everyone, maybe half the bus, but enough. Enough to make the man's isolation visible. Enough to shift the power dynamic from him standing over Grace to him standing alone against a collective rejection of his hatred. Grace's eyes watered, not from shame now, from something else entirely. Something that felt like hope wrapped in human decency. The teenage boy spoke up, phone still recording. Dude, this is going viral. Everyone's gonna see what kind of person you are. My TikTok has 200,000 followers. You're about to be famous for all the wrong reasons. The man's confidence cracked further. He looked around, seeing the phones, the faces, the solidarity forming against him. You're all this is, his words stumbled. The script he'd expected wasn't playing out. People were supposed to stay quiet, supposed to let him have his way. That's how it always worked. Can this coalition be trusted? Grace wondered. Or will they fade when things get harder? But Marcus caught her eye in the mirror and nodded slightly. A small gesture that said, we're in this together now, however it ends. Grace sat back down, deliberately, claimed her seat again with the weight of every ally behind her. The man stared at her, then at Marcus, then at the watching passengers. His phone lowered slightly. The construction worker pulled out his own phone, started recording. For the record, I'm witnessing a man refuse to sit next to a black woman for explicitly racist reasons. Just want that documented. Others followed, more phones, more witnesses. More evidence that this wasn't a misunderstanding or a simple disagreement. It was exactly what it looked like. And now it was being preserved in digital permanence. The man's breathing quickened, trapped, cornered by his own words, his own choices. Marcus remained standing, calm, immovable. The radio crackled. 47, supervisor is 5 minutes out. 5 minutes. A plan was taking shape in the collective action of strangers who'd become allies, not through grand speeches or organized movement, just through the simple, powerful act of refusing to look away, of making the cost of hatred visible. The man's arrogance was dissolving, but something more dangerous was emerging underneath desperation. Marcus felt clarity settle over him like cool water. 23 years of driving had taught him to read situations, to predict how conflicts would resolve. This man was cornered. Cornered people either surrendered or escalated, and this man didn't look ready to surrender. He remembered something Diana had told him once. They'd been watching the news, another video of injustice, another story of someone treated as less than human. Marcus had said what he always said, nothing we can do about it. Diana had looked at him with those eyes that saw through everything. There's always something, even if it's small, even if it's just bearing witness and refusing to move on too quickly. Marcus had the evidence now, multiple witnesses, video from multiple angles, a timeline established through the radio dispatch. If this went south, if he lost his job, faced discipline, got sued, he had documentation, truth backed by proof. He pulled his personal phone from his pocket, opened the voice memo app, hit record, placed it on the dashboard where the man could see it. For the record, Marcus said clearly, this passenger boarded at Riverside and 5th at approximately 7:53 a.m. He refused to take an available seat, stating explicitly that he wouldn't sit next to you people, while gesturing to the passenger in seat 3B. Multiple witnesses heard this statement. I offered him 3 options: sit, apologize, and find another seat, or exit. He refused all 3. Supervisor was called at 7:56 a.m. Current time is 8:03 a.m. The man's face went white. You can't, that's not, you're making me sound like. I'm documenting facts, Marcus said, same as everyone else here. He gestured to the phones. Unless you want to claim all 20 people are lying. The teenage boy spoke up. I can send you my video, sir, for your records. Me too, said the construction worker. The elderly woman nodded. I'll provide a written statement if needed. Grace watched this unfold with something like awe. What had started as her isolated humiliation was transforming into collective accountability, not just for the man, but for everyone. Witnesses were stepping forward. Evidence was being gathered. The system that usually protected people like him was being used to protect her instead. Marcus met her eyes again. Ma'am, are you willing to file a formal complaint with transit authority if needed? Grace's voice came out stronger now. Yes. And you'll provide your contact information to the supervisor. Oh, yes. The man exploded. This is insane. You're all acting like I committed some crime. I just didn't want to sit somewhere uncomfortable. The nurse in scrubs spoke quietly. You said you people. We all heard it. That's not about comfort. That's about bigotry. And yeah, there are consequences for that now. Hope was returning, not naive hope, realistic hope. The hope that came from seeing the machinery of justice actually work when people refused to let it rust. The obstacles were still real. The man could still sue. Marcus could still lose his job. Grace could still face retaliation in ways they couldn't predict. But the plan was solid. Document everything. Get witnesses. Let truth speak louder than power. One shot at justice. It wasn't guaranteed, but it was real, and sometimes real was enough. The radio crackled again. 47, supervisor pulling up now, black sedan. Through the windshield, Grace saw a car park ahead of the bus. A woman emerged, black late 40s, sharp suit, tablet in hand. She walked with the efficiency of someone who'd handled 1,000 situations and wouldn't be rattled by one more. The man saw her too, his desperation peaked. Finally, someone with sense, someone who'll see this driver is harassing me for no reason. But as the supervisor approached the door, Marcus caught something in her expression. Recognition, maybe, or understanding. She'd been driving buses before becoming a supervisor. She'd seen this before, she knew. Marcus unlocked the door. The supervisor stepped aboard, every eye in the bus turned to her. The weight of judgment, hope, fear, and anticipation made the air thick enough to taste. This woman held power, real institutional power, and everyone waited to see how she'd use it. The plan was in motion. Now they'd see if the system could be made to work for justice instead of against it. The supervisor's heels clicked against the bus floor. 3 sharp sounds that made everyone straighten. She surveyed the scene with practiced efficiency. The standing man, Grace in her seat, Marcus at the front, phones still recording, passengers frozen in uncomfortable attention. "I'm Supervisor Davis with Metro Transit Authority." Her voice carried authority without aggression. "Someone want to tell me what's happening here?" The man jumped in immediately. "Thank God you're here. This driver has been harassing me, threatening me, refusing to continue his route because I didn't want to sit in one specific seat. He's been recording me without consent, turning passengers against me and—" Sir Davis held up a hand. "I'll get to you, Driver Wells, your reports." Marcus kept his voice level factual. Passenger boarded at 7:53, refused to take the only available seat. When asked why, he stated he wouldn't sit next to you people while indicating the passenger in 3B. I informed him this violated conduct policy and gave him options to comply. He refused. I called for supervisor assistance per protocol. Davis nodded, making notes on her tablet. She looked at Grace. "Ma'am, is that accurate?" Grace's voice barely shook. "Yes, that's exactly what happened." "And does anyone else have information about this incident?" Hands raised throughout the bus. The elderly woman, the construction worker, the nurse, the teenager, others, a forest of witnesses. Davis's eyebrows rose slightly. She pointed to the elderly woman. "Ma'am." That man used explicitly racial language. Multiple times, we all heard it. "The young man there has video evidence." She pointed to the teenager. Davis turned to him. "Can I see that video?" The teenager stepped forward, pulling up the footage. Davis watched, her expression hardening incrementally. The man's voice came through clearly. "I'm not sitting next to you people." No ambiguity, no room for interpretation. Davis handed the phone back. "Thank you." She turned to the man. His face had gone from pale to red again, sweating despite the morning cool. "Sir, under Metro Transit Authority Policy Section 12.4, discriminatory conduct toward passengers or staff is grounds for immediate removal and potential ban from the system. Based on multiple witness accounts and video evidence, I'm going to need you to exit this bus." For one shining moment, victory seemed certain. Justice was happening. The system was working. Grace felt relief flood through her like warm water. Marcus's shoulders relaxed slightly. The passengers let out held breath. The man stared at Davis. "You can't be serious." "I'm completely serious." "Do you know who I am? I'm an attorney with Morrison and Blake. I ride this bus 5 days a week. I've never had a problem before, and you're going to take the word of—" He stopped, reconsidered. "You're going to believe all of them over me." "I'm believing video evidence, sir. And yes, multiple credible witnesses. Now please exit the bus or I'll have to call police for trespassing." The man's expression shifted. Calculation replaced panic. He pulled out his wallet, extracted a business card, handed it to Davis. Morrison and Blake, corporate litigation, that's me, Stephen Pritchard, senior partner, and you just made the biggest mistake of your career. He looked directly at Marcus. I'll have your job, your pension, everything. By the end of the week, you'll be unemployed and unhireable. Then to Grace, and you'll wish you'd just moved to the back where you belong. The words landed like ice water. The brief celebration evaporated. Reality crashed back. This man had power. Real power. Money, lawyers, connections. The kind of power that crushed people who challenged it. The kind that turned righteous stands into cautionary tales. Davis's expression didn't change, but something flickered in her eyes. Doubt, fear, the understanding that doing the right thing might cost more than she'd calculated. The passengers shifted uncomfortably, second-guessing their involvement, wondering if their videos would make them targets too. The moment that had felt like triumph suddenly felt fragile, breakable. Marcus's jaw tightened, his voice came out quieter. Ma'am, my statement stands, whatever happens, happens. But uncertainty had crept in, nothing was certain anymore. Justice had seemed close, and then the cost of it became visible. Stephen Pritchard straightened his tie, confidence flooding back now that he'd played his power card. He looked around the bus, making eye contact with each phone holder. I hope you all understand, posting those videos constitutes defamation and harassment. My firm specializes in destroying people who think they can ruin reputations online. So think carefully before you hit upload. The teenage boy's hand lowered slightly, second thoughts visible on his young face. Others looked away. The collective courage was fracturing under the weight of threatened lawsuits and real-world consequences. Grace felt the familiar sinking. This was how it always ended. Power won, money won, people like her absorbed the damage and moved on because fighting back cost too much. She thought about her job. Would this follow her? Would patients' families request different nurses? Would her supervisor call her in, suggest maybe she should have just moved, just been more accommodating? The personal cost was crystallizing. Marcus could lose everything he'd worked 23 years to build. She could become a pariah, the troublemaker, the woman who made everything about race. The witnesses could face legal threats they couldn't afford to fight, all because one man couldn't tolerate sitting next to her. Davis looked at the business card, looked at Pritchard, looked at Marcus. The calculation happening behind her eyes was visible, whose job was worth more, who had more to lose, which choice led to less paperwork, fewer complications, an easier path. Mr. Pritchard, she said slowly, your threats are noted, however. Not threats, promises, he smiled, cold, certain. I've destroyed unions, bankrupted companies, ruined careers. You think one bus driver and a supervisor are going to be difficult? This will be a Tuesday afternoon for my paralegal. Grace saw Marcus flinch, saw the weight land on him, 23 years, retirement close enough to taste. Grandchildren who needed him stable, employed, secure, and here he was throwing it all away for a stranger on his bus, for a principal that might not pay his bills. She couldn't let him do it, couldn't let him sacrifice everything for her. Marcus, she said softly, it's okay, I can move, let's end this. Marcus looked at her through the mirror, something passed between them, understanding, grief, the shared exhaustion of fighting fights they never asked for. But then the elderly woman spoke, her voice shaking with age and fury. I marched with Dr. King in 1963. Birmingham, got arrested, spent 3 days in jail, lost my job. My father disowned me for it. You know why I did it, she pointed at Pritchard. Because of men like you, men who thought power meant you could treat people however you wanted, that consequences didn't apply, that the world belonged to you and everyone else just rented space in it. She looked at Davis. I'm 73, got cancer, stage 4, probably won't see next spring. You think I'm scared of his lawyers? Sue me. Get in line behind the medical bills. But I'll be damned if I stay silent one more time while someone gets degraded because of their skin. The bus went silent, absolute, complete, the kind of silence that comes when truth lands so hard it stuns. Pritchard opened his mouth, closed it. For the first time, his certainty wavered. The construction worker stood. I'll testify, don't care about lawsuits, truth is truth. The nurse may too. The teenager, my video's already backed up to cloud. Post it or don't, it's documented, I'm not scared of you. One by one, voices, hands raised. People who'd been wavering found their spines again, not because they weren't scared, they were, but because that elderly woman with cancer and nothing left to lose reminded them what courage actually looked like. Grace's eyes filled, her voice broke when she spoke. You don't have to do this, any of you, I don't want anyone hurt because of me. Marcus turned fully around, looked her in the eyes. Miss, this stopped being about you 10 minutes ago. This is about whether we're the kind of people who let this happen or the kind who say no. I know which kind I want to be when my grandkids ask me about this someday. Davis looked at her tablet, at Pritchard, at the witnesses, and Grace saw the moment the supervisor made her choice. Her back straightened, her voice hardened. Mr. Pritchard, you need to exit this bus immediately. Your threats toward my driver, toward me, toward passengers, that's additional misconduct. You're now banned from Metro Transit Authority for 6 months pending a formal review. Exit now or I'm calling police. The moral dilemma had crystallized. Give up safety and stability or give up dignity and truth. Every person on that bus had chosen truth. The cost was too high, but they'd pay it anyway. Because some things mattered more than safety. Some moments demanded you stand even when you'd rather sit. The decision was made. The resolve had hardened to steel, and whatever happened next, they'd face it together. The allies had rallied, and the man who thought power made him untouchable was about to learn differently. Pritchard's face went through a series of expressions: disbelief, rage, calculation, panic. He looked at Davis like she'd spoken a foreign language. You're banning me? I'm the victim here. Davis's voice cut like surgical steel. Sir, I've reviewed video evidence, heard multiple witness statements, and listened to you threaten legal action against passengers exercising their right to document incidents on public transportation. You violated conduct policy, you made discriminatory statements, and you attempted to intimidate witnesses. That's 3 violations. 6-month ban, appeal if you want, now exit or I press this button. As she held up her phone, police number visible on screen. The bus had become a courtroom, fluorescent lighting harsh overhead. Passengers in jury rows, Grace the plaintiff, Marcus the defender, Davis the judge, and Pritchard the accused, finally facing something he couldn't lawyer his way out of. This is insane. His voice pitched higher, desperation clear now. You're all insane, I'm going to exit the bus. Davis stepped aside, gesturing to the door. Pritchard looked around one last time, searching for an ally, a sympathetic face, anyone who'd validate his version of reality. Found nothing, just phones recording, just witnesses starring, just the cold documentation of his own words played back through technology he couldn't deny. Fine, he grabbed his briefcase. Fine, but this isn't over, not even close. He moved toward the door, stopped beside Grace's seat, leaned down slightly. You cost people their jobs today, hope that makes you feel powerful. Grace looked up at him, and for the first time since he'd boarded, her voice came out clear and strong and absolutely certain. I didn't cost anyone anything. You did. The moment you decided I was less than human, that's on you, all of it. His face twisted. He wanted to say more. The words were right there, visible in his expression, but Davis was watching. The phones were recording, and whatever he said next would be preserved forever as evidence of exactly who he was. He left, stumbled down the stairs and onto the sidewalk. Stood there for a moment, briefcase hanging from white-knuckled fingers, staring at the bus like it had betrayed him. Then he turned and walked away, smaller somehow, diminished. The doors closed. For 3 heartbeats, nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The weight of what had just happened pressed down like atmosphere. Then the elderly woman started clapping, slow at first, then faster. Others joined. Not everyone, some people were still uncomfortable, still processing. But enough. Enough to fill the bus with the sound of relief and vindication and shared humanity. Grace covered her face with her hands, her shoulders shook. The construction worker patted her shoulder awkwardly. You okay? She nodded, couldn't speak. Wasn't sure if she was crying from relief or exhaustion or the sheer overwhelming flood of being seen, being defended, being treated like her dignity mattered. Marcus sat back in the driver's seat. His hands trembled as he gripped the wheel. Davis touched his shoulder. That was handled perfectly, Wells, textbook. I'll make sure the report reflects that. Am I? His voice cracked. Am I going to lose my job? Davis smiled slightly. Not on my watch. And if anyone tries, they'll have to go through me, the union, and about 20 witnesses with video evidence of you following policy to the letter. You're fine. Better than fine. You did right. She raised her voice, addressing the bus. I need statements from anyone willing to provide them. You can email them to Transit Authority or fill out forms at any station. Your testimony matters. It protects driver Wells, protects this passenger, and helps us keep our system safe for everyone. Hands raised again, emails were exchanged, forms were promised. The machinery of bureaucratic justice churned slowly to life. Will truth be believed? Grace had wondered. The answer was yes, when enough people refused to look away, when documentation backed up words, when power met collective resistance. Yes, truth could win. Davis handed Grace her card. Ma'am, I'm sorry you experienced that. It's unacceptable. If you want to file a formal complaint, criminal harassment, discrimination, I'll support it fully. You have witnesses, you have evidence, you have options. Grace took the card, nodded, couldn't quite find words yet. The teenage boy approached, shy now. Miss, I'm going to post the video. With your permission, I think people should see. I think, he struggled with the thought. I think people need to know this still happens, and that people stood up. Both parts matter. Grace looked at him. This kid may be 17, using his phone for something beyond entertainment, documenting injustice, creating accountability. The next generation learning to be allies in real time. Yes, she said, post it, let people see all of it. Justice had arrived, not perfect, not complete. Pritchard would probably appeal, probably make their lives difficult in small ways they couldn't predict. But here now in this moment truth had won, not because it was inevitable, because people chose it, chose to speak, chose to record, chose to stand, chose each other over comfort. Marcus released the brake. The bus rolled forward, continuing its route 15 minutes late. Nobody complained. The usual morning irritation at delays had evaporated, replaced by something else. Something that felt like purpose, like they'd all been part of something that mattered. Grace sat in her seat, the seat she'd refused to surrender, and looked out the window. The city rolled past. Same buildings, same streets, but different somehow. Or maybe she was different. Maybe that's what justice did, changed you, reminded you that dignity wasn't a gift from others. It was yours, always had been. The applause faded. The bus returned to normal noise, conversations, phone notifications, the rumble of tires on asphalt. But the memory of this morning would stay with every person who'd been here, would change how they saw similar situations, would remind them that silence was a choice, not an inevitability. And somewhere in that ordinary Tuesday morning, on a city bus running 15 minutes late, something extraordinary had happened. Not a revolution, not a movement, just people remembering what it meant to be human, to care for strangers, to refuse to look away. Sometimes that's enough, sometimes that's everything. By noon, the video had 300,000 views. By evening, 5 million. The teenage boy's TikTok became a meeting place for people sharing their own stories, moments they'd spoken up, moments they wished they had, moments they'd been Grace or been Marcus or been the witness who stayed silent. The comment section divided predictably. Support and rage in equal measure, but the video existed, the truth existed. And for every person saying Grace should have just moved, 10 more said they'd never stay silent again. Metro Transit Authority released a statement by 3 p.m. We stand fully behind driver Wells' actions. Discrimination has no place on our buses. Passengers who cannot treat others with dignity will be removed. The statement went viral too. Corporations that usually stayed neutral were forced to pick a side. They picked the right one. Pritchard's law firm released their own statement Thursday morning. Stephen Pritchard is no longer employed by Morrison and Blake. His views do not reflect our values. Corporate self-preservation, maybe, but Grace would take it. Consequences rarely came for men like that. This time they did. Grace went to work that day same as always. Her supervisor called her into the office. Grace braced for criticism, for suggestions that she should have handled it differently. Instead, the supervisor hugged her. "I saw the video, I'm proud of you. This hospital is proud of you. You need anything, time off, counseling, support, you tell me." Patients' families who'd seen the video asked for her specifically, wanted to meet the nurse who'd stood her ground, wanted their children cared for by someone with that kind of strength. Grace felt strange about being celebrated for simply refusing to be degraded, but she accepted the kindness. Let it heal small wounds she hadn't realized were still bleeding. Marcus got a commendation at Friday's Transit Authority meeting. 300 drivers attended, showed up on their day off to support him. The union president gave a speech about courage and protocol working together, about how Marcus had done everything right and created a template for others facing similar situations. His daughter called him crying. "Dad, I've been telling my students about you all week, about how you stood up. They think you're a hero." Marcus had laughed, uncomfortable. "I'm just a bus driver who finally did what I should have been doing all along." But his voice had broken saying it, and she'd heard the pride underneath. The elderly woman, her name was Margaret Chen, sent Grace a letter, handwritten. It arrived Tuesday, exactly 1 week after the incident. "Dear Grace, I've been dying slowly for 8 months. Every day I wake up wondering if this is my last, but last Tuesday I felt alive, felt like I mattered, felt like the years of regret for staying silent could be forgiven just a little. Thank you for giving me that gift, for letting me be brave before I go. With love, Margaret." Grace kept that letter, framed it, hung it where she'd see it every morning. Some days you need reminders that your existence matters, that standing up ripples outward in ways you can't predict, that courage is contagious. The world after Truth looked almost identical to the world before. Same streets, same bus routes, same morning coffee and tired faces, but something fundamental had shifted. People recognized Grace and Marcus around the city, nodded, smiled, sometimes said thank you for reasons they didn't need to explain. The seat beside Grace on her morning commute stayed empty for 3 days. Then a white man, older, kind-faced, sat down, opened his newspaper, didn't say anything, just sat, chose that seat specifically. When he got off at his stop, he paused. "Thank you," he said simply. Grace understood. He was choosing too, small choice, but choices add up. Pritchard's 6-month ban was upheld. He appealed twice, lost both times. Video evidence was difficult to argue with. Grace heard through Transit Authority that he'd moved, taken a job in another city, running from his own documented bigotry. She felt no satisfaction in it, just relief that he wouldn't be on her bus anymore. Marcus drove his route every day, sometimes thought about retirement, sometimes thought about Diana and wished she'd been there to see him finally stand up the way she'd always stood. But mostly he just drove, greeted passengers, made sure everyone got where they needed to go safely. His job, his purpose, his small corner of the world where dignity was non-negotiable. Grace's transformation was quieter. Internal, she walked taller, spoke up more quickly when something felt wrong, didn't swallow small injustices to keep peace. Her mother noticed on their Sunday call. "Baby, you sound different," Grace smiled. "I feel different, Mama. I feel like Mama Ruth." The symbolic closure came when Margaret Chen died in November. Her family invited Grace to the funeral. Margaret had left instructions. Grace should sit in the front row, should be honored as family. At the service, Margaret's daughter read from her mother's diary. The entry from that Tuesday morning, "Today I was brave again. After 40 years of cowardice, I remembered who I used to be, who I wanted to be. It felt like coming home." Grace cried through the entire service, realized that her choice to stay in her seat had given Margaret something precious, redemption before death. Proof that it's never too late to stand up, never too late to matter. What lasting impact remains, Grace wondered as she left the funeral. And the answer came clear as winter air. Every person on that bus was changed. Every viewer of that video was challenged. Every witness to injustice was reminded they had power. Small power maybe, but real. The world doesn't change in one moment, but it changes one moment at a time. And that Tuesday morning on Bus 47 was one of those moments, documented, remembered, shared. A reminder that ordinary people can do extraordinary things when they simply refuse to look away. 6 months later, Grace still rode the 7:42 a.m. bus. Same route, same seat when available. Sometimes people recognized her, sometimes they didn't. It didn't matter anymore. The video had faded from trending topics, replaced by newer outrages, fresher stories. The internet moved on. The world kept spinning. But the people who'd been there that morning, they carried it with them. Grace saw it in how Marcus greeted every passenger now, not just friendly but attentive, watching, making sure his bus was a place where everyone belonged. She saw it in how strangers stood up for each other. A man harassing a woman at the back, 3 passengers intervened before the driver even noticed. Someone making discriminatory comments, phones came out, documentation happened, accountability followed. The seeds planted that morning had grown in quiet ways. Grace thought about Mama Ruth often, wished she could tell her about that Tuesday, about finding the strength to stay seated, about Marcus and Margaret and a teenage boy with a phone, about how the lessons passed down through generations had proven true dignity cannot be stolen, only surrendered. She'd learned something else too, something Mama Ruth never quite said outright but lived every day. Standing up for yourself teaches others to stand up for themselves. Your courage gives others permission to be brave. Every act of resistance creates possibility for the next one. The universal lesson wasn't complicated. It was simple, ancient, and desperately needed. See injustice. Name it. Refuse to be complicit. Stand with the vulnerable. Use whatever power you have, phone, voice, witness, to say this is not acceptable, not here, not today, not ever. Grace arrived at the hospital every morning with that understanding, saved lives with skilled hands, but also saved dignity with careful words, stood up for patients treated dismissively because of race or accent or appearance, used her voice because she'd learned it mattered, because that Tuesday morning proved silence was never neutral, it always sided with the oppressor. Marcus was counting down to retirement now, 18 months left. His grandkids asked constantly about the day Grandpa was a hero. He always corrected them. I wasn't a hero, I just finally did what was right. The hero was Miss Grace staying in her seat, I just backed her up. But they didn't buy it. To them, Grandpa had fought injustice, and that made him Superman. The bus rolled through city streets now carrying more than passengers. It carried a story, a reminder, a challenge. Every person who'd seen that video, who'd heard that story, faced their own moment eventually. A moment where staying silent was easier, where looking away was safer. And some of them, not all, but some remembered Bus 47, remembered Grace and Marcus, and chose differently than they might have before. That was the ripple, not dramatic, not measurable. Just the slow, steady change that happens when enough people decide humanity matters more than comfort, when enough witnesses become participants, when enough bystanders become allies. Grace opened her book, a different one now, romance instead of thriller. The seat beside her was occupied today. A young black man, maybe college age, headphones in. He'd chosen that seat deliberately. She saw it in how he'd scanned the bus, seen her, nodded slightly before sitting. A small acknowledgement, you were her, I see you, thank you. She nodded back, no words needed. The city passed outside the window. Same buildings, different light. Morning commute rolling toward another ordinary day of extraordinary small choices. Moments where people decided who they wanted to be, where justice waited for someone brave enough to claim it. Grace thought about all the seats her ancestors had been forbidden from, all the buses they'd been forced to the back of, all the indignities absorbed and swallowed because survival required it. And she thought about how their sacrifices had built the foundation she stood on, how their courage had made her courage possible. The moral wasn't that one moment fixed everything. Pritchard was one man, there were thousands more like him. Discrimination didn't end because of a viral video. Racism didn't disappear because people clapped on a bus. But something did change. The cost of silence became visible. The power of solidarity became real. The possibility of justice became tangible. And every person who'd been there or seen the video carried a new understanding. You are not powerless. You are not alone. Your voice matters. Grace's phone buzzed. A message from Marcus. Morning, hope you're having a good day, still grateful you stayed in that seat. She smiled, typed back, still grateful you stopped the bus. That was the truth underneath everything. Neither of them had been perfect. Both had been scared. Both had considered backing down, but they'd chosen each other over fear, chosen dignity over peace, chosen truth over comfort, and that choice had rippled outward in ways they'd never fully know. The teenage boy, his name was Devin, had started a nonprofit. Witness and Act trained young people to safely document discrimination and support victims. He credited that morning as his inspiration. I realized I had power I'd never used, power to see and record and refuse to let injustice hide. We all have that power. Margaret Chen's family established a scholarship in her name for students committed to civil rights work. The application required an essay about a moment you stood up for someone else. Hundreds of students applied every year, each with their own story of choosing courage. Margaret's legacy multiplied. And Grace just kept living, kept riding the bus, kept saving lives at work, kept speaking up when silence would have been easier. Not because she was special. Because she'd learned what her grandmother always knew, change doesn't wait for heroes. It needs ordinary people having the courage to stay exactly where they belong. The bus pulled up to City General Hospital. Grace gathered her things, stood, moved toward the door. Marcus caught her eye in the mirror. They exchanged the look they'd shared every morning for 6 months, acknowledgement, respect, shared memory of the day everything changed. I have a good shift, Miss Grace. Oh, you too, Marcus. She stepped off the bus into morning sunlight. The hospital rose before her, 12 hours of chaos and healing ahead. But she walked toward it differently than she had 7 months ago. Walked with the weight of her grandmother's legacy and the knowledge that standing up mattered. That dignity defended rippled outward. That justice was possible when people refused to look away. Behind her, the bus pulled away, continuing its route through the city, carrying people to their destinations. Ordinary people on an ordinary morning. But every one of them now understood something they might not have before. You have a choice, every single day, in every situation, to stand or to sit, to speak or to silence, to protect your comfort or someone's humanity. Grace pushed through the hospital doors. Someone was waiting in the lobby, a young black woman, maybe mid-20s, nervous. She approached Grace hesitantly. "Excuse me, are you the nurse from the bus?" Grace nodded, yes. The woman's eyes filled. I wanted to thank you. I was fired last month for complaining about discrimination at my job. Felt like I'd ruined my life by speaking up, but I saw your video, and I realized I did the right thing. Even if it cost me, I did the right thing, so thank you for reminding me that dignity matters more than a paycheck. She left before Grace could respond. Just walked away, shoulders a little straighter than when she'd arrived. And Grace understood. This was the impact, not fame, not recognition. Just people finding strength in each other's courage. Just witnesses becoming allies. Just ordinary humans remembering they could be extraordinary when it mattered. She walked toward the elevator, ready for another shift. Another day of holding bobbies and comforting parents and fighting for lives that hung in balance. The work she'd chosen, the purpose she'd claimed. But now she carried something else too. The knowledge that her grandmother's lessons were true. That silence protects no one. That dignity cannot be stolen. That change starts with one person refusing to move when the world says they should. Change doesn't wait for permission. It starts with one voice refusing to be silent and a chorus brave enough to join. Every seat claimed for dignity, every witness who speaks. Every moment someone stands up when sitting down would be easier. That's how the world shifts, not all at once, one bus ride, one choice, one brave soul at a time. The elevator doors closed. Grace rose toward her floor, toward patients who needed her, toward a life lived in small acts of courage and daily choices to see people's humanity. The bus rolled on through city streets below, Marcus behind the wheel, new passengers boarding, same route, different day. But nothing was quite the same anymore. Because 23 people had been in the right place at the right moment and chose justice over comfort. And that choice would echo longer than any of them would ever know. Some mornings change everything. This was one of them. And the story, the real story, wasn't about one woman or one driver or one bigot getting consequences. It was about all of us, about the daily choice between silence and speech, between looking away and bearing witness, between protecting ourselves and protecting each other. Grace stepped out on the pediatric floor, heard a baby crying, a parent's worried voice, the familiar chaos of a place where life and death danced every day. She tied her hair back, washed her hands, stepped into the work she loved. Ready for whatever came next, strong enough to face it. Because she'd learned the most important lesson: you are never as powerless as you think, never as alone as you feel, and your courage, however small, however scared, can change someone's world. Maybe even your own.